organisations are hit with this type of attack, it can be the rabbit in the headlights, like, you know, what do we do now? I suppose at the time, so my former role, 32 years law enforcement, and at that time, way back when in sort of late 1990-ish, 2000, I was running a number of serious and organised crime departments at Scotland Yard, one of which was the fraud squad. So, you know, several hundred guys dealing with very long, protracted frauds. Not my normal cup of tea, which was far more sort of proactive, fast pace, criminal investigation type stuff. But because of the fraud squad work, I was doing lots with the banks. So we started to see how the banks were having issues with fast time money movement going through, mainly money laundering. But when we were approaching companies to find out about some of the losses and some of the the compromised data that was being used for transferring money, back then, you know, cyber wasn't even a word. It was high-tech crime, it was digital crime, it was fraud, it was all traditional crime, and nobody wanted to talk about the fact that, you know, their organisation had been attacked or breached and data had been stolen and their customers were losing money. So it was all very under the table, kept quiet. We didn't have any picture as to how much of this stuff was going on. And back to your question, you know, what was the most prevalent type of stuff that was going on? But then we saw some attacks taking place, and I always say it was quite fortunate at the time, on the back of, you may recall, the Julian Assange, the WikiLeaks, the freedom of speech type groups, primarily anonymous, that started to launch attacks on organisations under the, you know, we have a right for our voice to be heard. That's fine, but knocking over organisations that were dealing with, you know, money movement and the likes of PayPal or MasterCard, putting them out of service, significant harm being caused. So we saw early days, only because the other stuff wasn't being reported so much, we saw a lot of these attacks, denial of service types attacks, knocking over organisations. You may recall it was, you know, Fathers for Justice. They jumped on the bandwagon and were attacking organisations. So the most prominent type, visible type of cybercrime that we saw was a lot of denial of service attacks, bashing organisations over. I think, so last week I was with a company, and I think, you know, the topic that's spoken about time and time again, and how it's developed and become far more sophisticated, and that really causes significant harm to businesses, and is certainly when you know, organisations are hit with this type of attack, it can be the rabbit in the headlights, like, you know, what do we do now? Ransomware. And no, I remember way back in the day when ransomware was quite straightforward. It would be, you know, you receive an email and your computer is locked down because you've been doing, you know, illegal file sharing or downloading music, you know, that you weren't allowed to download, and you get this symbol sign would come up on your screen saying you have been fined €50 or £50 and pay your money now. And I remember when early days when they were actually using our police logo. We'd set up the sort of original sort of starter for 10 cybercrime unit in law enforcement, the Police Central E-Crime Unit, PECU, and they were using our logo that we had as one of the, you know, you've been locked down for file sharing, you need to pay the PECU money. We thought that might help with our funding challenges that we were having at the time, but that was very low level. But nowadays, you know, you see companies big organisations. We've seen most recently, we've seen the NHS, the health sector, government sector, anywhere where there's really rich data and they know that they can cause significant harm. They like the legal sector, the health sector, financial sector, and it's not a straightforward attack and lock that organisation down now. Everything is now being connected to our networks, and every day there is some development around technology and new bits of kit for both defending and lots of kit for being developed by the attackers. So I think, how do we actually stay match fit to deal with cyber attacks and the cyber technology that's out there? I think key to all of that is really getting the right people in place. A lot of my old cyber unit were detectives from flying squad. We had loads of industry players, and it's that mindset, people that are keen to stay match fit, keep up the pace, keep up the learning, keep the interest and the development going, because technology changes at such a pace that if you're good at doing a certain aspect and dealing with a certain piece of technology today, you'll fall behind. You have to have that intrigue, that interested mind. I think the other thing as well is, nobody can deal with cyber in isolation. It's a team game. And, you look at the attackers, and the attackers will work quite often. They'll have their own organised network, the criminal network, and they'll headhunt individuals to form part of their attack network from around the world. They almost check their CVs and hire. And we need to sort of copy that. We need to be sharing intelligence. We need to be working with the best people. We need to have the networks of sharing intelligence as to what's going on, what's happening. So we saw with COVID causing all the problems, and that sort of was a big nudge, a big push towards lots more people using their own bits of kit, their own laptops, their own phones, lots more working from home, own devices being used, and we saw massive increase in attacks and harvesting data, and certainly cyber crime on the back of reporting to be government bodies offering furlough payments or COVID, you need to click on this, that, and the other. So any hot topic, the cyber criminals will utilise that for their advantage. Now people are working far more remotely. Obviously that opens up more doors for the cyber criminals. But I think we shouldn't sort of steer away from that. I think working from home, as long as it's done following the right processes and procedures that businesses put in place, should be a great enabler. I think where we can fall foul is when people don't follow the right process. They haven't got the right security AV, or they're not using the right company process. I think just to put a simple example in place, we've seen some breaches where you think, why have they actually breached? Why have they stolen the data from that company? They don't have any financial gain to be had. There's no real, you can't work out the incentive for stealing the data from that company. But then when you look at the people who may have their data within that company database, so Charlie McMurdie, for example, and Charlie McMurdie in that database that's just been harvested, which whether it's social media database or selling toilet rolls or something particularly insignificant, that Charlie McMurdie uses the same password on that database as Charlie McMurdie uses on her company email. So we've seen that can be used as a very simplistic tool, because people use the same password on umpteen different platforms and forums. So that gives a leg up.